The movie focuses on the health dangers of GMOs and Roundup that are found in non-organic foods. And it does so in a way that it presents people who switch to organic and their health and their lives were turned around. Autistic boys who are no longer on the spectrum, infertile couples who now have children, people who had cancer, skin conditions, allergies, brain fog, who are overweight. They switched to organic and they got better. And the doctors in the film verify that these are not just one-offs. They actually have the same experience in their clinics every day when people switch to organic.
From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
Hey, Hilda here. An apple a day keeps the doctor away, unless it is sprayed with pesticides. Honestly, there are many secret ingredients lurking in our food and on our food that may be unknowingly compromising our health. This is episode 276, and our guest today is Jeffrey Smith of the Institute for Responsible Technology. He is a leading anti-GMO consumer advocate and filmmaker. Today, Jeffrey discusses with us his documentary Secret Ingredients. He exposes the problem with genetically modified organisms, Roundup, an herbicide that contains carcinogenic compounds, and other pesticides. He explains how these are the leading cause of many chronic ailments and degenerative diseases. He educates us about the difference between conventionally grown and organic food and why it is so critical to switch to the latter. Before we get into the conversation, a quick word. Order your genuine alpaca vest from the Foundation. A good friend of the Weston A. Price Foundation makes these vests from alpacas raised lovingly in Maryland. They are soft, warm, and durable. The vests, I mean. They come in 3 colors, gray, dark brown, and light brown. They have the words Wise Traditions embroidered in red on the left-hand side. A zipper runs down the middle, and they have 2 pockets. These vests normally go for $140, but we are offering an exclusive discount for podcast listeners. You can buy your warm, cozy alpaca vest for 20% off using the coupon code WTVEST at checkout. I just got mine, so get yours too. Go to westonaprice.org and use the coupon code WTVEST when you place your order. Ancestral Supplements grass-fed beef liver. Grass-fed and grass-finished liver from pasture-raised cows is among the most nutritionally dense food in existence. This type of high-quality liver is loaded with vitamins, minerals, proteins, and healthy fats that support collagen synthesis, immune health, and heart, brain, and liver health. Our early ancestors knew this, which is why their traditional diets included the frequent and nourishing consumption of this nutritional powerhouse. Ancestral Supplements grass-fed beef liver is 100% pure bovine liver. Visit ancestralsupplements.com and order yours today. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
There are lots of health documentaries out there today. Why did you decide to make Secret Ingredients?
Well, the impact of the movie appears to be more effective at converting people to organic diets than anything else. I've never seen anything that was more effective because this focuses on the health dangers of GMOs and Roundup that are found in non-organic foods. And it does so in a way that it presents people who switch to organic and their health and their lives were turned around. Autistic boys who are no longer on the spectrum, infertile couples who now have children, people who had cancer, skin conditions, allergies, brain fog, who are overweight. They switched to organic and they got better. And the doctors in the film verify that these are not just one-offs. They actually have the same experience in their clinics every day when people switch to organic.
Jeffrey, how did you find the people to focus on in the documentary?
Well, first of all, starting in my previous documentary, Genetic Roulette, which isn't as good as Secret Ingredients, which I did with Amy Hart, tons of people started to change their diet and report to me that their lives changed, that their kids were no longer violent, impulsive, and being thrown out of school. Just dramatic changes. So I started asking audiences, how many of you noticed a change in your health when you switched to non-GMO and organic? And I got 150 lectures worth of people, some of them doctors reporting on behalf of thousands of patients each, verifying this incredible transformation. So Amy Hart and I brought a video camera to a chiropractic conference, and we said if anyone wants to make a testimonial on camera about a transformation of themselves or their patients, let us know. And so Kathleen DiChiara was the first on the list for the day's interview, and her story was so compelling. I had heard thousands of stories, and this one was simply over the top. She had a family with 21 chronic conditions between the 5 members.
Oh my
She
God.
was paralyzed and had all sorts of issues. Her son was autistic. Her husband had a breast tumor. Her other son had mood issues and digestive problems. Another son had eczema all over his body. When she lost her job because she was too unhealthy, she switched to become an expert in nutrition, and she took a accredited course, and she spent 1,700 hours studying it and read 200 books and listened to 800 hours of interviews. And she started experimenting with her family, and she noticed that when she removed gluten and preservatives and commercial dairy, etc., things got better, but they were still managing the particular symptoms. When she switched to organic, that's when everything got better. So she had been testing on the family as an experiment and came up with the goods right in front of her. Her son at the time was still on the autistic spectrum, but he wasn't exhibiting any symptoms. So when he went into when the parents went into the last diagnosis by the licensed professional, we have on camera when he was declared no longer autistic.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just dramatic. I mean, there were so many scenes. Now, at the end of this interview with Kathleen in the hotel room at this chiropractic conference, Amy Hart made it very clear, this is our person.
Yeah.
We just need to go to her house. But there were people waiting in the hall for that. And the next person that was interviewed was Marcia Schaefer, a doctor, a chiropractor, who was putting infertile couples on organic diets along with the chiropractic, and they were getting pregnant. And at the point that I had talked to her, she had over 50 with no fails. Anyone that followed the protocol was getting pregnant. By the time we finished the movie, it was 92 out of 92 couples.
Oh my gosh. Talk to us, because you know the science. What is it about the food that isn't organic that has ingredients in it that are damaging our health?
Well, the ones that we focus on are GMOs and Roundup. There are other nasty synthetic chemicals that are sprayed on non-organic foods, but we can get all the mileage we need out of GMOs and Roundup. In fact, we can get a lot of mileage out of Roundup. Now, you could think, well, Roundup is sprayed on Roundup-ready crops, and so if you avoid GMOs, you avoid Roundup. But if you're paying attention, that's not true. Roundup is now sprayed on the grains in this country, on the beans in this country, and also on a lot of fruit and vegetable fields. And when it's sprayed right on the grains and right on the beans, it's sprayed to kill the crops. It actually dries them down. It forces immediate ripening for some of the grains. It dries down these other crops, and it also kills the weeds for the next growing season. And they're going to be harvesting anyway, so they just spray. Now, the issue is that it's in high concentrations, for example, in oats, in chickpeas, in lentils, and mung beans, and wheat. So it's throughout the food supply. And if we just look at Roundup, for example, it can grab minerals and make them unavailable, so it creates mineral deficiency. It can block the shikimate pathway used by gut bacteria that produces the serotonin, melatonin, and dopamine precursors. So that neurotransmitter deficiency can be devastating to all sorts of mental conditions, sleep, pain, Parkinson's. It can cause leaky gut, gaps between the cell walls, not only leaky gut, but leaky brain and leaky organs. It kills off the beneficial gut bacteria because it's an antibiotic that's preferentially hunts and kills the beneficial ones, not the pathogens. It damages and kills off or destroys mitochondria, which is the energy centers of our cell, and linked to also cancer and longevity. It also can mess up hormonal balance. It can just damage the DNA, and it can promote cancer. And I'm just getting started. So if you look at the main foundations, even cellular intercommunication, which is called the gap junctions cause intercellular communication, and it's reduced by 50% in one study. And that is one of the mechanisms for causing cancer. It can interfere with detoxification, both in the liver through the P450 cytochrome pathway, and also through the NRF2 pathways in each of the cells. And so all of the other toxins that we're being exposed to in the environment, whether it's by food, water, air, by touching, all of them can become more dangerous if their normal detoxification pathway is blocked by glyphosate, the chief poison in Roundup.
Wow. So glyphosate is like the accomplice to, letting these other kind of toxic criminals into our body or making them more potent.
Absolutely. It opens all the doors of the prison.
Oh, no. I mean, I'm totally picturing this. And what makes me sad, Jeffrey, is I'm thinking of people who don't know this information. So they just look at the price when they go to the store and they see organic berries, let's say, versus regular berries and think, well, I'm not going to get the organic. The regular ones are on sale, and they have no idea what might be on those berries. Now, in the case of berries, we could wash them off. But what I hear you saying is in the wheat, in the legumes, in the chickpeas, it's kind of integral. It's within the plant itself. Is that right? Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, and it's anything that's sprayed with Roundup, it's systemic. And so it won't be something that you can wash off. It goes right inside. So if you spray Roundup on Roundup-ready crops, then it'll be absorbed into the plant. There's actually a surfactant that the glyphosate is combined with that drives it right through the plant tissues. And about 15% go out through the roots, or maybe 20%, depending, and the rest stay in the plant.
Because the objective of the Roundup is to deter insects from ruining the crop.
Roundup is a weed killer, not an insecticide. So what happens is you spray it on the whole field, and where it lands on the weeds, it drives it into the weeds and it kills the weeds. But it happens to drive into the crops as well. So it's like they don't have an intention or desire to necessarily get the Roundup residue levels really high in the Roundup, the genetically engineered crops. They're focused on the weeds. But the GMO crops allow you to spray right over the top of the field because they're genetically engineered to survive otherwise deadly doses of Roundup. So soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, and alfalfa are all Roundup ready. But oats are also sprayed just before harvest, later in the growing season than these GMOs. And the way that they're formed, the oats are just opened up to the spray themselves, so the oats get the spray right in the food portion. So oats are the highest recorded grain level that I know of for residues of glyphosate. But that was dwarfed by hummus and navy beans and other things, peas. And it's not just from the United States, it's from other countries as well. So you want to be careful if you're getting grains or beans, make sure that it's organic. Even some, the berries, I don't know, I have to find a list right now, which we have a list actually on our site at responsibletechnology.org of the residue levels for Roundup. And then we're also posting a list that we got of what percentage of crops in the United States are sprayed with Roundup. And then, so that gives you an idea of what to avoid. But in reality, it's just safer to go organic or grow your own or know your source. If it's not organic, you know who grew it and that they did not use spray.
Now, the people who are spraying these crops, are they the ones like wearing those hazmat suits? I feel like I've seen memes and I'm like, is this for real? Are these people spraying them but totally covered because they know how poisonous this all is?
That's a very good question. So I have been talking to the lawyers of these trials where Monsanto got fined. Well, basically, the jury determined that the Roundup caused cancer of the plaintiffs and that Monsanto was hiding the evidence. In one case, Monsanto circulated documents so that people in the company who used Roundup would wear rubber gloves and rubber boots and certain protective gear and masks. But when they advertised it on television, they showed people in shorts and tank tops. And there was no warning about what to wear for the general public. So their own people were given strict warnings, and the lawyers took a Tyvek suit from an applicator, and put Roundup on it, and it dripped through the bottom. So even the suits that are designed to protect against contamination do not hold back the glyphosate because it has this surfactant that drives it through the material. Now, it's interesting that when Monsanto was testing Roundup with the surfactant to see if it was penetrating human skin, they took cadaver skin, dead body skin, and they found that 10% got into the skin, which is much higher, more than 3 times higher than the allowable level. Mm-hmm. So they hid that information from the government and instead did a Monsanto-style experiment. I'm very aware of this because I've been studying their style of checkbook science for a long time. They took human cadaver skin and they baked it in an oven. And you know what happens to meat when you bake it in an oven? It gets very tough.
Yeah.
But it still wasn't strong enough to protect, so they then froze it in a deep freeze and then took this leather-like substance and applied Roundup, and lo and behold, very little got in. So they reported that as how protected human skin is in this rigged research that had no bearing on reality. They were basically, committing fraud and submitting the fraudulent results to the EPA. That came out in the Monsanto documents made public from these lawsuits. So ideally, anyone applying Roundup should be wearing these hazmat suits and still being protected because they don't necessarily protect. I don't know what kind of thickness you'd need to protect, but it's being sold as safe, and they're demonstrating it with people wearing shorts and tank tops.
So that's alarming. And my question is, since that lawsuit has been settled and they were fined and some of the gig is up for Monsanto, can we expect them to use less Roundup, or can we expect for our food supply to become safer as a whole?
Unfortunately, they're still sticking to their guns. Monsanto was purchased by Bayer, the aspirin maker, and they continue to put out false and misleading information claiming that Roundup is safe. They have their own lapdogs in the EPA that are working on their behalf. We know that from the documents made public that they had people really literally just doing Monsanto's bidding at the EPA. And so the EPA claims that the Roundup is not dangerous, does not cause cancer. And they're trying to stop the countries and the jurisdictions and the companies that are abandoning Roundup. And there's more and more. So at rounduprisks.com, we have a little training videos from people who were able to stop the spraying of Roundup at their school or their park or by their county or by their city, and convince them to switch to non-toxic, healthy alternatives. And so people can do that locally.
Coming up, Jeffrey talks to us about how gene editing, another form of genetic engineering, could be an even greater threat to the planet's survival than climate change.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Mountain Rose Herbs. Mountain Rose Herbs offers high-quality, organically grown herbs, spices, teas, and botanical goods. They are big on the things that we all care about: quality. Their products are certified organic, vibrant, tasty, and proven safe. Responsible sourcing from organic farmers and wild harvesters is their hallmark. They offer a variety of products including essential oils, candles, soaps, and more. Plus, they've earned a zero-waste certification in Oregon. Go to mountainroseherbs.com and place your order today. That's mountainroseherbs.com. Ancestral Supplements grass-fed beef liver. For most of human history, we effortlessly consumed the things we needed for strength, health, and happiness. Like the fertile ground that we once walked upon, we were a natural extension of this earth. In the modern world, we struggle to fulfill our nutritional needs and sustain a vibrant, disease-free life. Grass-fed and grass-finished liver from pasture-raised cows is among the most nutritionally dense food in existence. Our early ancestors knew this, which is why their traditional diets included the frequent and nourishing consumption of this nutritional powerhouse. High-quality liver is loaded with vitamins, minerals, proteins, and healthy fats that support collagen synthesis, immune health, and heart, brain, and liver health. Whole food, nutrient-dense organs can provide great benefit for those seeking targeted support in harmony with nature, the way that our early ancestors did. Ancestral Supplements grass-fed beef liver is a whole food dietary supplement that provides 100% pure bovine liver. So visit ancestralsupplements.com and order yours today. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions.
And of course, if you have dogs or cats, you want to avoid allowing them to be roaming in areas that have been sprayed. But as we're talking about the food, pet food is filled with Roundup residues as well. In fact, there's so much glyphosate levels in standard dog food that they have the highest level of Roundup in their urine that have been tested 30 to 40 times higher than humans. And we think that's why they have the highest cancer rates of any mammals. 1 out of every 1.6 dogs are expected to have cancer. And glyphosate, the chief poison, causes cancer in animals, according to the World Health Organization's chief cancer committee.
Yeah, just the other day I was talking to my neighbor and he had to put his dog down. I said, "What happened?" He said, "Oh, he was riddled with cancer." And I wondered, how would his dog get cancer? How do dogs get cancer? And as a matter of fact, this is not the first dog I've heard of that has cancer. So you're right, it is on the rise. You know the statistics, and now you've given me a reason to consider that glyphosate could be at play.
Yeah, and you can send people to petsandgmos.com. We have a list of popular dog and cat foods and their levels of glyphosate, and we have some that we recommend that are organic or non-GMO and don't use glyphosate, and we have some of their levels as well. So, and we have a video of many veterinarians who've seen the light. They actually, as one of their primary tools for treating animals, is change their diet from those that are filled with GMOs and Roundup to those that are clean. And I was talking to Dr. Barbara Royal, who's an author, and she happens to be Oprah Winfrey's veterinarian. And she says the first thing that she does is put dogs and cats on a healthy diet. And then when she sees them a few weeks later, 80 to 90% of the problems are managed. And in those cases, maybe half of them are completely gone, and the other half don't need anything because it's being worked out. Only 10 or 20% still need to have attention. She said when she was going through vet school, they hardly talked about cancer or dog allergies. Now they're completely riddled with cancer and dog allergies in their practices, and it started to rise after GMOs were introduced.
Yeah, I heard of a family who started feeding their dog better, and their dog got healthier. And then when I say better, I mean going to more real foods and more like organic stuff. And then they realized, wait, we're feeding our dog this way. Maybe we should be feeding ourselves this way.
Yeah, sometimes it's the pets that convince the pet parents, and sometimes it's the pet parents that are convinced to do it to their pets. What I think, however, is that there's still a disconnect. Here's why. 46% of Americans are seeking non-GMO food for themselves, but only a tiny percentage of pet owners are seeking non-GMO and organic food for pets. If we can connect the dots with the people who are already aware of the dangers of GMOs and Roundup for themselves, and just connect the dots and say, well, what are you feeding your dog or cat? And they'll go, oh my God, I didn't think of that. If they can switch, then we can end up with a tipping point in pet food that's already lively in the human food world. Right now, there's so many people seeking non-GMO that the food industry is stripping it out systematically in large numbers. But it's not happening in the pet food industry. So we need people to help with that. And so if you go to petsandgmos.com, there's a 2-minute video and a 10-minute video. Please post it on your social media channels, all of them, and post it often and ask people to share it. It will save the lives of pets. It'll improve the health of pets, and it can help hopefully drive the tipping point in the pet food industry.
I love that. You've mentioned a few links. We'll certainly put those in our show notes. And so now I want to ask you, who is defending GMOs besides Monsanto? Like, I know there's still a big debate about if they are safe, if they're okay for the population. I think some people have even said, with GMOs, we can feed the world. Who is behind that and why?
Well, the Feed the World argument was a public relations firm that was working on behalf of Monsanto in the late 1990s. And then they figured, let's try and use that guilt-ridden narrative to force the developed world to adopt GMOs for the sake of the developing world. And so they chipped in, the biotech companies, $50 million a year for 5 years to create that PR narrative. However, the science blows it apart. GMOs don't actually increase yield, which is, guess what? You actually can decrease yield with GMOs and have mixed results in other cases. And the top experts at feeding the world were pulled together, the scientists, to put together a UN report called the ISTAD report. It had over 400 scientists as authors, over 58 different countries signed on to the report. And it concluded that GMOs have nothing to offer to feed the world or eradicate poverty or create sustainable agriculture. So it's just a myth. Now, there's another myth. I mean, when GMOs came on the market, in the mid-1990s, they said, it's safe and predictable. Well, it's not. It's very unsafe and very unpredictable. So now there's gene editing, which is another form of genetic engineering, creating GMOs that don't necessarily introduce genes from other species, but just manipulate the genome in laboratories. And they say, now this is safe and predictable. And they've convinced the government of Australia that has no regulations whatsoever for gene-edited plants, animals, or microorganisms. Convinced the US government, which is trying to do the same and trying to force other countries to do the same. And yet they are very, very dangerous and could theoretically be far more dangerous than the GMOs already on the market. And because it's so cheap and easy to use gene editing, you can get a do-it-yourself kit for $160 on Amazon, and I wouldn't recommend it because you could be contributing to the replacement of nature in this generation, where instead of passing on to future generations the products of the billions of years of evolution, we pass on the products of laboratory techniques whose number one most common result is surprise side effects. And
that's why some people call these genetically modified and gene-edited plants frankenfoods, because they're not really food anymore, are they?
Well, in this case, we're talking more than just the foods. We're talking about bacteria, viruses, trees, grasses, anything with DNA is up for grabs. And there is a gene rush, like a gold rush going on. And Frankenstein, they combine many different things to create the Frankenstein monster. Well, they combine or alter nature in ways to create these frankenfoods and franken insects and frankenfish. And so the Institute for Responsible Technology at responsibletechnology.org, we're raising money to sound the alarm on this potential existential threat that 7 out of 7 audiences where I've spoken have declared it as a greater threat to planetary survival than climate change. And we have a 3-minute video at a completely unbranded site because we want everyone to be sending people to protectnaturenow.com to watch the 3-minute video. And there's links at the bottom of that page to other resources about this new existential threat. We have a rather big task to get
I would say so.
to get the entire world aware of this so we can get new policies in place by governments, by universities, by institutional review boards. We want to alert everyone. And so we're really starting a new movement, and we're in a rush because right now gene editing is out there and the biotech industry is successful at convincing governments that there's no harm. Whereas we point out, for example, that there's genetically engineered bacteria that was almost released in the 80s that could have altered the weather patterns on the planet, and another bacteria that could have, according to one scientist, ended terrestrial plant life. These are catastrophic, cataclysmic potential events that were nearly avoided, just at the last minute avoided. And now we're talking about creating a technology where you can set up your own lab for $2,000 to create all sorts of genetically engineered bacteria and release it. It's potentially cataclysmic. And with the process of gene editing, you can edit, let's say, a mammal, like a mouse. And when you use these molecular scissors to cut the DNA, you have no control over what happens next. And one thing that happens next is that when the cell starts to repair that cut, it can pull DNA from its environment. It can pull bacterial DNA, it can pull DNA from the serum that's used that was to support the cell. And so you end up with retroviruses from other animals inside the mouse. You end up with bacterial DNA that has antibiotic resistant genes inside hornless cattle. So we have experiences already where the very process can create potentially catastrophic effects. This is the gene editing that's supposed to be so safe and predictable.
Well, I'm so glad that you are sounding the alarm. Again, we'll put the links in the show notes because people need to be made aware of what's happening on this big level. And then on a micro level, you've also given us some advice for how to protect our own family's health and our pets' health by avoiding GMOs and glyphosate and pesticides. So I'm so grateful for all of that. And I just want to wrap things up, Jeffrey, by asking you the question I often pose at the end. If the listener could do one thing, only one thing, to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, it's normally something that I would say is eat organic. But you mentioned for your families also, when you mentioned that, just to tell your families to avoid. A lot of people come up to me and says, how do I tell my brother? How do I tell my spouse? How do I tell my kids? They're not paying attention. And I said, you can't do it. You're discredited because you are a spouse or a sister or a family member. Let me do it. Let Amy Hart and I do it. Show them the film Secret Ingredients. And what happens is people who are already organic become more organic, more committed. People who have been resisting it for years, they sometimes become more outspoken in favor of it than the people that have been trying to get them to change. So I would say, yes, it's eating organic, but I'd say on the way, watch the movie Secret Ingredients with your family, with your friends. In fact, if you go to secretingredientsmovie.com, you can get a community license to show it. It's very inexpensive, and you could show it for the rest of your life. And you can even take those people that see it, and if you want, you can organize group potlucks in your area. You can bless people who will be thanking you. I tell you, at the Weston Price Conference and at conferences all over that I speak to, people come up to me in the hallways and say, you saved my life, or you changed my life, or you saved my family. And what I did is I talked about the dangers of GMOs and Roundup, and they made changes. Now you just hit play. You just put them down in a seat and hit play, and you can be saving people's lives. I mean, think about what we would do, how much energy and effort we would do to save a life. And here it is so simple.
Wow. Well, that is excellent advice. I'm going to go, cook up some sprouted organic popcorn and get my family around the TV. I'm serious. That is a great idea, because I often hear that as well. People say, how can I persuade my family? And actually, one thing people also do in our groups is they share the podcast. But here's a nice visual, stories that will be told with scientists and others saying this is, like you said, not a one-off, but this is a pattern of people recovering their health as they make this switch. So thank you so much for your work, Jeffrey, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
My pleasure. Safe eating.
Our guest today was Jeffrey Smith. Visit his website, secretingredientsmovie.com. And I'm Hilda Labrada Gore. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for this episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for a review from Apple Podcasts. I couldn't recommend it more. I could not recommend this podcast more. I have been following the Weston A. Price Foundation for years and somehow had not started listening to this podcast until this past January. Once I started listening, I have not been able to stop. The information provided by the guests is eye-opening and so well-informed. I am currently in a nutrition program, and this foundation gives me endless inspiration to keep spreading the truth about what real food can do. The foundation's website provides so much incredibly valuable information, and this podcast helps to give people a snapshot into that information and makes it more digestible. Thank you so much to Hilda and the guests of the podcast and the foundation for the work that is being done. It is an inspiration. That is from P. Teeple 12. Oh my gosh, we are so thankful that you wrote this review. Every review that's posted makes the show more enticing to the potential listener. So please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, or write a letter to the editor and send it to our office, and perhaps we'll publish it in an upcoming journal. Thank you so much for listening. That's it. Stay well, my friend. Hasta pronto.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.